Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Alissa Coram here. I'm joined today by Justin Nielsen. And Justin, what a day in the stock market it was. We're going to go really in depth on the broad market action that we're seeing, but give us a little preview of what we're going to be talking about today in particular.
So yeah, we'll start with the NASDAQ, and then we're going to drill down into an intraday chart on the QQQ. That's the NASDAQ 100 ETF. So we're really going to kind of see how we can play this intraday to kind of make sure we're not panicking, but at the same time making sure we're taking action. We're also going to kind of look at IWM, which is the Russell 2000 ETF, to kind of get a sense of how the sector rotation was playing out before and how it changed. And then we're going to end with the idea of what is it that you're going to be looking for, what stocks look like when they're holding up well, and the ones that maybe should be on your future watch list.
Fantastic. Well, let's get started with a look at the major indexes. This is a chart of the NASDAQ here, of course, on a historic run, clearing that 10,000 level with yesterday's session, but today getting hit very hard, down about 5.3%. The Dow down almost 7% for the day. The S&P 500 down 5.9%. Now, we've been saying the whole while that we've been climbing up and up and up, and most recently 4 days in a row here that we were due for some kind of a pullback, but just not seeing quite the declines all at once like this.
Yeah, and I mean, last Thursday when you and I were on the show, we were talking about how, yeah, okay, getting up to that 9,500 level, past that, and it looked, like ripe for a pullback then. I thought it was going to go lower at that point, but it just continued to power on ahead right to 10,000 without stopping. And then the 21-day line, that was the line that we were kind of looking at as a very normal place for the markets to pull back to. And so, as you said, we just didn't expect it to happen in one day. The type of action that you saw today, this is really unusual. I mean, it's not like it's without precedent. I kind of did a quick search, and you had probably 44 days in the history of the NASDAQ that you were down like 5% or more. So it's not something that happens very often, considering how many days there are in the history. But it's usually in those kind of crisis periods. So the last time we saw 5% drops was back in March, when we were kind of in that crisis mode with coronavirus. Before that, it was in 2011, August of 2011, when there was a fear of global recession. And before that, it was the financial crisis in 2008. So this was a very significant drop. And a lot of times people will kind of go for the headline in terms of what happened, what caused this. And sometimes the why is not as important as just looking at what happened, and reacting accordingly. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the QQQ intraday, because this is something we were talking about on IBD Live today. And, we're going to look at a 5-minute chart here. And as we were on IBD Live, we were kind of talking about at the beginning, like, look, we're gapping down. We try not to react very quickly. We try to get a good sense of where the market is, what it's doing. And as it pulled back, it seemed like it was getting support. It seemed like we were coming, right back up a little bit. Now, we thought that we would still be looking at a down day, but the fact that we were kind of getting that support, we now had a level. And right as we ended IBD Live, we were starting to come back in, but even then, it was a nice test of those lows, and we seemed to get support. It was when we lost that support, and this is what we were saying on IBD Live to look out for. When you start seeing that loss of support, that's where you need to start taking action. And the first thing you want to do is you want to take a look at your portfolio and say, okay, what are the things that are the weakest? What are the things that I don't have the best entry on? What are my C+ stocks? And then you start looking at your A+ stocks, and the ones that you want to hold on to, you try to keep those the longest, you start shedding a little bit. But this is the exact kind of action that we don't like to see, where it just kind of stair-step down further and further and ended up closing at the lows. So the best thing to do in those cases, rather than kind of necessarily wait until the end of the day, is sometimes to peel off some of your positions, again, your weakest positions, as you're seeing that come down. Now, if you had early entries, then guess what? you might be in a position where you didn't have to do anything. If you're in more long-term leaders, that's great, and you might not have had to do anything with your portfolio today because you're already sitting on a lot of gains, and you can just kind of weather the storm if this is a normal
Mhm.
pullback to the 21 day. But it's definitely worth taking note of what happened today.
Yeah. Well, speaking of a pullback to the 21 day, I guess maybe that's the silver lining here, if you could find that, is the fact that we are still hanging in there above that 21-day line. We saw some other tests of that level
Yeah.
along this rally. So, in terms of where do we go from here tomorrow morning, the type of action that we want to see to cap off the week, that's going to be a pretty critical level to be watching.
Right. And really the expectation is that we'll probably undercut it. It's just a matter of, do we get support? Now, keep in mind, last Thursday, I thought we were going to be looking at a lot more weakness, and it didn't happen. So you have an expectation, in the same way that when you're playing poker, if you have two aces, in your hand, you expect that you're going to have a strong chance of winning that hand. So you kind of have to go with what the odds are, even though sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But the expectation would be for us to go a little bit lower today. I mean, tomorrow at least. And the fact that we have a weekend coming up, with some potentially startling news with more states getting hospitalization increases and things like that, the fear of the second wave, that's going to be weighing on investors' minds. So they might not be looking to put too much support in tomorrow. But we'll see. Things change.
Mhm.
Headlines come out.
Yep.
Last week it was the unemployment numbers. The jobs report surprise. So there's always something that can come in that can change
Mhm.
investors' minds very quickly.
Yeah, definitely important to be flexible. But I do know for sure we will be talking about market
Yeah.
conditions in depth and the battle plan, so to speak, tomorrow morning on IBD Live. So we definitely hope you join us. But let's shift our attention over to, as Justin previewed, the small caps. We're looking at the iShares Russell 2000 ETF, IWM. And even before today's strong losses for small caps, we were already seeing a little bit of weakness on Wednesday with the undercutting of that 200-day line.
Right. And so, we were seeing this strong sector rotation move, that was happening as, people were getting more optimistic about the economy opening up. A lot of the stocks that have been beaten down a lot really fell out of favor. I mean, what was it last week? They were talking about jets and how American
Mm-hmm.
Airlines was up, 40% in one day. So a lot of those real economy stocks were seeing a surge. A lot of the beaten down stocks were seeing a surge, and the indexes like the mid cap index, the S&P 400, the Russell 2000 small cap index, and S&P 500 to a large degree, they were seeing more strength. But that strength really started shifting this week, and you saw the NASDAQ composite kind of reassert itself, growth names reasserting themselves in terms
Mm-hmm.
of strength. And so if you had been playing some of those, it was kind of an early warning sign that, hey, you know what, the strength might be shifting again. And so, hopefully you took advantage of the opportunity to kind of recognize that and make that shift. Now, personally, I mean, I was still very heavily invested yesterday because, again, growth looked like it was,
Yeah.
the place to be. That's where I was. And so it's not like I didn't get hit today. I absolutely did. And I'm going to have some explaining to do to my wife when she gets home. So we'll see. But that was the early warning, and in terms of where you
Right.
should be. And it was definitely out of the small cap, the mid cap, and those areas that we're seeing a temporary surge.
But the thing to do now is to make sure that you are keeping top growth stocks that are showing relative strength on your radar. And
Right.
one such name is Chewy. And even though it did close a little bit down for the day, we are seeing that relative strength line holding strong. And it's this blue line here. It measures price performance versus the S&P 500.
Right.
So we look at it as a bullish technical indicator, not only when we're seeing stocks break out, but also when the market is coming under pressure, which names are holding up and resisting the sell off.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself. The thing is, you really want to be looking at those because the relative strength line will be going up in many of those cases. So, and a lot of people ask, well, how can Chewy's relative strength line be going up on a day when the stock was down? Well, Chewy was down 1%, and the S&P 500 was down over 5%. So
Yeah,
that's where the
almost
relative
6.
strength, yeah, so that's where the relative strength comes in. It
Hmm.
was relatively stronger even though it was down. And so that can be a very easy tell of where strength is moving to, what things are holding up best. And those should be the first things that are on your radar. If you do a little bit of unloading over the next couple of days to just lighten up, if you were getting very aggressive, again, if you had, long-term holdings that you're looking at that you got good entries on, in a lot of cases, you might not have to do anything, but
Hmm.
you do want to take a look at all your stocks. And tomorrow, we're going to be probably looking at a lot of our stocks in terms of where they're at in relation to their 10-week moving average lines. If we're seeing them come down to their 10-week moving average lines, then we're going to be noting that, hey, we might have to take some action on these. But the stocks that are still well above their 10-week moving average lines, like Chewy, those are going to be the last ones to go because they're holding up relatively well.
That's right. And one more note on the relative strength line is that our research shows that stocks that have these RS lines that are hitting new high ground as they're breaking out, or the ones that you're going to have on your watch list when the market sees weakness, those are the ones that are most often the leaders
Right.
once the market does, regain its strength.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we were looking at in April. On April 2nd, we saw the follow-through day on the S&P 500. On April 6th, we saw the follow-through day on the NASDAQ composite. Those were the stocks that we were looking at. And you don't have to wait for the stock to get into new high ground. The relative strength line,
Definitely.
getting into new high ground first before the price does, can
That's
be,
even
again,
better.
an early indicator and absolutely the best case scenario. Mhm.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, that's maybe just a taste of what you will get tomorrow morning on IBD Live, our hour-and-a-half live stream every morning, starting 10 minutes before the opening bell, running through the first hour of trade, where our experts share their screens, talk about historical precedents that we're seeing, action plans for handling your portfolio, and of course, a notable stock. So we definitely hope you join us to cap off the week, which once again, it's been a very historic run. And like Justin mentioned, we haven't seen something like this in quite a while. So our experts can definitely provide some much needed perspective during this time.
Absolutely. And as you said, the big thing is kind of sometimes on days like today where we can kind of help give you an action plan for if you see this, this is what you're going to be wanting to do.
Yes. And one more thing before we go, if you could check out investors.com/video survey, we would much appreciate it if you could give us your feedback about our videos, this show, IBD Live, investing strategies, you name it. We definitely want to hear from you and take that feedback and improve our videos to better serve you. And with that, we will see you right back here tomorrow. Thanks for watching.